welcome to Crime and Court. My name is Heather, and this is part 2 of the transcript reading of the hearing for the motion for contempt. This was Prosecutor McLeland filed this for this motion, or for this hearing, to hold for Judge Gull to hold them in contempt, which it's not really even in her jurisdiction or her authority to do so. But anyways, there's a whole bunch of problems with it. And we're reading the transcript now. So there is no video or audio at this point in time. We don't have anything like that. The best we have is the transcript. So I'm going to read the transcript for you. And if you didn't catch the first one or just want a refresh of what we talked about in the first one, there were many motions and Judge Gull just flat out denied Hennessy everything. And it's really crazy. Like, you could even, like, her rudeness even comes off in the transcript. It's insane. But anyways, just to Hennessy, not McLeland. She's fine with McLeland. But anyways, so we had a bunch of motions, and then we had Officer Mullen, but McLeland kept calling him Mullins with an S. He was on the stand, and he answered some questions about, just finding, the discovery, how he would note when things would come in, and then he would, send it over to the defense or prosecution or whatever. He sent it over to whoever he would send it to. And yeah, they talked about that a little bit. What else? Oh, also the Gary Baudet, that's the other thing I was going to mention, was the emails. That was a good argument in episode or part 1, where they're arguing about McLeland having to, wanting to call McLeland to the stand and calling him as a witness, and they argue back and forth. And of course, Judge Gull denied the defense to use McLeland as a witness, but that would have been, it was funny to hear the back and forth. And it would have been funny, I think, if McLeland was on the stand. So anyways, I do want to also thank Criminality, because they are the ones that paid for this transcript, and then they shared it with everybody. So there is a Google Doc that they shared, and that's why their name is in the background on these transcripts. So thank you to them. All right. So before we get started, please hit that like button. Let's get in. All right. So Mr. McLeland is going to now be questioning Lieutenant Jerry Holman. That is where we left off. He has not started his direct examination yet, so it's going to be interesting. And of course, Jerry Holman, if you've been paying attention with the Frank's memo, he might be crooked. I don't know. We'll see. It seems he's part of Unified Command, and Unified Command was getting all this information about the Odinist stuff, and they did nothing about it. So I think, Jerry Holman needs some questioning about a lot of stuff. Anyway, so Mr. McLeland's questioning Jerry Holman. Will you state your name, Jerry Holman? And he spells it. And how old are you? Sorry. And how are you employed? I don't even know how I got that. I saw the I don't know. How are you employed? With the Indiana State Police. And how long have you been employed in that capacity? It'll be 22 years in June. And did you go through special training or education to become a law enforcement officer? Yes, I did. Can you tell me about that, please? I went through the Indiana State Police Academy. I graduated. I started January 2001, and I graduated in June of 2001. And are you familiar? So how long does police academy last? 6 months? That's it? To be a doctor, you got to go to a special school. Why? And that's many years. They're saving lives, and police officers do very important work, and they only get trained for 6 months, if I'm taking this correctly, from January to June. Anyways, and are you familiar with this case of State of Indiana versus Richard Allen? Yes, I am. And are you an investigator who participated in the investigation of that case? Yes, I am. And I want to take you back to the beginning of October 2023. Do you recall that time? Yes, I do. And what happened in the beginning of October of 2023? I received a phone call from you stating that you received information from Becky Patty, who is the grandmother and legal guardian of Liberty German, that crime scene photos were being leaked. So he received a call from the prosecutor. All right. And once you were told of that information, what did you do next? I started inquiring on what type of photos were leaked and tried to find out where they were being leaked from. And what did you do first about finding out that information? Well, I received a phone call from, I know I'm going to say this wrong, Annie? I'm going to call you Annie because I know I'm not saying it right, and I don't even want to butcher it, so I think people call her Annie too. I don't know. Well, I don't, I'm sorry. I don't watch. Anya? This is going to bother me. All right. Well, anyways. I received a phone call from Annie Kane and Kevin Greenlee, who said that they had also received the photos, and they described those photos to me over the phone. Isn't it weird that a podcaster has the photos? I don't know. To me, this whole thing that they got the photos and they just held on to them and didn't do anything, I don't know. It's suspicious to me, but I'm not saying that they did anything, but just in the manner it was handled, I don't know, kind of weird. Anyways, all right. So they held on to the photos and described those photos to me over the phone. When those photos were described to you, were you familiar with the photos they were talking about? Yes, I was. How were you familiar with those photos? One of the descriptions of the photos was one that Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Rosie showed me in my deposition. And why was it unique enough that you could tell the photo from a description? It was a side-by-side, and I've never seen before that day, and it was created obviously by the defense attorneys, and I recall seeing it that day, and that's the only time I ever saw that photo. By the defense attorneys. All right. Okay. And so from the description, from those individuals you talked to, you recognized the photo was something the defense had created. Yes. And what did you do next? I believe I called you back and let you know that there was more than just what Becky Patty had told you. This is all very suspicious to me. I don't know. What do you guys think? All right. And from there, where did the investigation lead you? I talked to, again, Annie Kane and Kevin Greenlee, who said that they knew who had sent them the photos. And who sent them the photos? Mr. Cohan. And did you speak to Mr. Cohan? Later I did. Mr. Hennessy, objection, hearsay, violation of the right to confrontation, overruled. Yeah, of course. Did you speak to Mr. Cohan? I did. But before that, I got more information from Annie and Kevin that they stated that hold on, objection. What did he say? Did you stop him there? McLeland, yes. Okay, but you interrupted him. Was there a reason? If they were going to state that Mr. McLeland did something, McLeland did something. I don't know. Mr. McLeland, they stated that. I don't know. All right. And then when you spoke to Annie and Kevin, did you get documents from them? Yes. What documents did you get from them? They gave me several documents that were screenshots that were received from Mr. Cohen with communication with Mr. Fortson. Okay, did you receive any pictures? So Mr. Cohen and Mr. Fortson were in communication. They have screenshots of it. So that's how it gets to them. So Woodhouse, oh, I'm sorry, not Woodhouse. Yeah. Well, Brandon Woodhouse leaked it on his show. But, what was I going to say? I don't remember now. What's his name? Mitch Westerman. It's like totally escaping me. Mitch is the one that takes the pictures from the conference room of Andrew Baldwin, the attorney. And then he is in communication, I believe, with Mr. Fortson. And Mr. Fortson is in communication with Mr. Cohen. I think is the chain. If I'm wrong, if anybody knows better, let me know. But I think that's how it goes. And then, so Mr. Cohen is the link then to the Murder Sheet podcast people. And Annie, I know I'm not saying it right. I really apologize. I'm sorry. I don't, like, I've heard it before and I can never remember how to say it, and I'm sorry. All right, so they gave me several documents that were screenshots, and they received them from Mr. Cohen with communication with Mr. Fortson. Okay, did you receive any pictures from them? Yes. And what pictures did you receive from them? The pictures that they stated that Mr. Cohen sent. Okay. And when you got the pictures from them, did you recognize the photos? Yes. And I don't want to go into detail, but what were the photos of? Some of them were of the crime scene that, again, I knew had to come from the defense attorney because one of them was of Liberty and her private parts were blacked out and they used a circle, and in all the ones that we used for any type of reason, we used rectangles. Okay, I'm going to show you that what's been marked as Defendant's Exhibit 5 states Exhibit 5. Mr. Hennessy, yeah, there you go. Can you take a look at those documents, please? Can you tell the court what those documents are? The first one is a picture. Not just a group, I'm sorry. Not just as a group, sorry. Okay. It was a bad question. Can you tell the court, as a group, what those documents are? Photos that I received from Kevin and Annie. Anya, I know it's wrong. Sorry. And what do the photos show? Crime scene photos. Some of them are pictures of drawings and the crime scene. And do you recognize those photos? Yes, I do. And how do you recognize those photos? Again, they're crime scene photos and also photos that were presented to me in my deposition. Judge, I'm going to ask the court to admit what's been marked as State's Exhibit 5. I'm going to ask the court to admit those under seal. They're graphic crime photos. I did not transmit those to the defense. I told Mr. Hennessy I was not going to transmit those to him. State's Exhibit 5 offered. Mr. Hennessy says, let's see them. And Mr. McLeland says, I'm more than happy to have them look at those, but I would like those filed under seal, Judge. Any objection? Judge, yeah, I need to see them. Mr. McLeland, let me look at them. I've never received copies because I didn't want to because I didn't want to be sitting accused of contempt. I have no reason to object to them being placed under seal. The court says, all right, I will show 5 is admitted without objection and I will seal. Mr. Hennessy says, no, I need to see the exhibit. You asked if I object to them being sealed. I gotta make sure this is what I was shown before because they weren't given. Show him the photos, please. No objection, Judge. All right, I'll show 5 is admitted. Okay, now, Mr. Holman, if you recall, were those all the photos that you received from Ms. Kane or, the individuals, Kevin and Annie? No. Okay. Those are just, the ones we admitted are just a portion of those. Yes. Okay, and again, the one specifically of the crime scene depicting Liberty, was that something that the law enforcement created? No. And how do you know that? Like I said earlier, we use rectangles to block out the private parts, and that one had one rectangle and a circle, so I knew it was not produced by any of us. When you saw that photo, did you recognize it, though? Yes. Where did you recognize it from? It was a crime scene photo that was used and was taken from the scene. Was it also presented to you in a deposition? I believe so, yes. Some questions with the side-by-side photo that showed Abby. Is that something that law enforcement created? No. Do you recognize the photo? Yes. And how do you recognize it? It was shown to me in the deposition by Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Rosie. Like, this is my mic drop moment, and they're totally in contempt. No, I don't think so. All right, so once you got those photos, what did you do? Once you got the photos and the information from Kevin and Annie, what did you do from there? I notified you again of the photos and what my thoughts were. So again, he's going straight to the prosecution. And then I scheduled a time to meet with Annie and Kevin to take a statement and receive all the information they got from Mr. Cohen, which was probably recommended by the prosecution to do so, if that's what he had to. I bet you prosecution was like, well, get it on statement. All right, so question. And as part of the information, the documents that you got from them during that interview, did those include screenshots of messages? Yes. And who were the messages between? Mr. Cohen and Mr. Fortson. How did you know they were between Mr. Cohen and Mr. Fortson? Well, I saw the Facebook pictures of Mr. Fortson, and Mr. Cohen told me that they were. So you were able to identify from the messages Mr. Fortson? Yes. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 6, I believe. Are you familiar with the bundle of documents? Yes, I am. And how are you familiar with that bundle of documents? Those are the documents that I received from Mr. Greenlee and Ms. Kane. And can you describe what those documents are, not the content of them, but what they are? They are screenshots of communications between Mr. Fortson and Mr. Cohen on Facebook. And how do you know that? Because I'm familiar with Facebook, and it says Robert Fortson, and then it's also identifying Mr. Cohen. And do those accurately represent the documents that you received from Annie and Kevin? Yes. Judge, the state would move to admit what's been marked as State's Exhibit 6. I'm sorry. Preliminary question, please. Yes. This is Mr. Hennessy. Sorry. Mr. Hennessy interjects and says, a preliminary question, please. The court says yes. Mr. Hennessy continues, do you know how many pages is in 6? I do not. Do you remember how many pages you received from the murder sheet people? I don't know the exact number, no. And then, so State's Exhibit 6 reveals conversations between two people. Yes. Is Mr. Fortson deceased? Pardon me? Is Mr. Fortson deceased? Yes, he is. Judge, I would object on hearsay. It's impossible for the defense to be able to cross-examine and confront the speakers. This is clearly communications between two people, neither of whom are available for cross-examination. The court says, any response? Mr. McLeland says, Judge, the state does not believe it's hearsay. It's not going to the truth of the matter of the content in the statements. It's going to show that there was a conversation and that there was a continued leak. If the court does deem it hearsay, I believe there is an exception. If the court reads through the documents and reads through the statements in the document, there are several messages where Fortson says or asks Cohen to protect him from distributing the information and to delete messages once he knows the investigation starts. And so it's clearly statements against his interest in terms of trying to delete those messages and hide the evidence, and so the state would ask to overrule the objection. All right, how now show 6 is admitted over objection. She doesn't listen to the defense at all, and I believe that shouldn't have come in if it was conversations between people that aren't even testifying. All right. And we don't know how the Murder Sheet podcast people got it. They weren't testifying either about how they received it or anything like that to verify its authenticity. So I don't think it should have came in, but whatever. As you know, Judge Gull and I see eye to eye almost never. All right, so Mr. Hennessy continues, I'm sorry, but I would also belatedly like to add relevance because none of those conversations are connected to either Mr. Baldwin or Mr. Rosie, and there's no evidence or testimony that they were aware of the conversations, that they authored or authorized the conversation, so there's no connection to the two people that are charged with indirect contempt. Relevance. Court says to McLeland, you may proceed. She just doesn't even acknowledge him. She's just like, go ahead, Nick. Wow. All right. Thank you, Judge. What did you do next in the investigation? After receiving this information, like I said, I did an audio videotape statement of Mr. Kane, or Mrs. Kane and Mr. Greenlee, and then I contacted Robert Cohen. And did you interview him as well? Yes. And after you interviewed him, what did you do next? After I interviewed Mr. Cohen, I believe I interviewed Mr. Rick Snay. And between the interviews of those people, did you have an opportunity to go through the documents that were handed over to you? Yes. And the interviews that you conducted with those people, did it match the information that you saw in those documents? Yes, it did. After you talked to Mr. Snay, what did you do next? Mr. Snay advised me that he received objection, hearsay. It's okay. Wait, what? So the judge doesn't even say anything. McLeland's just like, keep going. Don't listen to Hennessy. The judge doesn't even rule because I guess she's just got an outstanding ruling that everything that Hennessy wants is overruled. All right, so it's okay. Why did you interview after or maybe he was saying to the judge, like, okay, to be fair, maybe he was saying to the judge, it's okay, I'll stay away from that question. Because he's going, Mr. Snay advised me that he received, so maybe he said, maybe he's saying, I'll stay away from that, judge, never mind. So, okay, to give him credit, maybe. So who do you interview after Mr. Snay? Kyra DeBrune? And through your investigation, did you continue to gather information on how the photos were leaked? Yes. Was that the purpose in interviewing these people, to determine the source? Yes. And once you saw the messages from Mr. Fortson, did you attempt to interview him? Yes, I did. Did you attempt to interview him about the things in that document? Yes. And did he give you any information? No. Did you attempt to subpoena his Facebook records to get a certified copy of those documents? We did. And when you examined his Facebook page, were those messages in there? I did not examine his Facebook messages, but Detective Rector did. Okay. He would be better. And after you attempted to interview Fortson, who did you interview next? I attempted to contact Mr. Westerman after I interviewed Mr. Fortson. And so the information that you got from the investigation at that point, he just said he didn't get anything from, he just said he didn't get anything from Mr. Fortson. Did you attempt to interview him? Yes. Did you attempt to interview him about the things in the document? Yes. Did he give you information? No. But then here you're like, next I'm going to Mr. Westerman based on the interview of Mr. Fortson. So did you or didn't you interview Mr. Fortson? What was said in that interview? Because Mr. Fortson shortly ended his own life after that. So what was going on in that interview? I don't know. And so the information you got from the investigation at this point, where did it tell you the leak was coming from? Mr. Westerman. Did you know who Mr. Westerman was? Not at that time, no. Okay, did you investigate to find out who he was? Yes, I found out who he was. Excuse me, preliminary question, please. The court says yes. So that's Mr. Hennessy interjecting, and now he's questioning. When you say found out, did somebody tell you stuff? I did. I did some investigation on my own. Mr. Hennessy continues. I'm sorry? I did some investigation on my own. Yeah, but what did you investigate? I mean, did you read documents or talk to people? Yes. Okay. I'd object as derivative of hearsay denial of the right to confrontation. Any response? Judge, I don't think it's hearsay for him to tell the court how he found out who Mr. Westerman was. I just don't think that hearsay applies, Judge. The court says, so it's course of investigation? Yes, Your Honor. Okay, then. Overruled. Mr. Hennessy says, I'm sorry, what was the overruled? No, I got that, but what did the court say right before that? He said it's during the course of the investigation how he got where he got. Mr. Hennessy continues, okay, well, there's no course of investigation exception to the hearsay rule, and there hasn't been for about 15, 20 years. The court says, I overruled the objection, sir. Yes, ma'am. Wow. She is awful. She should not be on this case. 100% needs to recuse herself. It's coming off in the transcript how much disdain she has for the defense. All right, and through the process, did you tell me about your attempts that you made to talk to Mr. Fortson directly? I attempted to call his sorry, this is Nick McLeland continuing questioning. Answer. I attempted to call his, one of the phone numbers I had for him. I had two, and the first one said, this is Robert Fortson, please leave a message. I left him a message identifying myself as with the state police and that I needed to talk to him about some information that came up in an investigation. And then I had another number I didn't know at the time, but it was actually to his father, Bob Fortson. I spoke with Mr. Bob Fortson, and he said that he worked at the Air Force Base and that he's probably up there and that he would call him and let him know to get in contact with me. And so on or about October 10th, did you go to the Air Force Base and attempt to talk to Mr. Fortson? Yes, I did. And did you gather any information about him, or from him, sorry? Very little. Did you ever attempt to get a hold of Mitch Westerman? Yes, I did. And does Mitch Westerman, through your investigation, did you find out if Mitch Westerman had a connection to the defense, Mr. Rosie or Mr. Baldwin? I did. Tell me about that connection. He used to work for Mr. Baldwin as I'm not sure what he was employed as, but he used to work for Mr. Baldwin. Do you know if he was still employed by Mr. Baldwin? I do not believe he was, no. And so that doesn't mean that he can't still use him like on a consultation basis. And that takes us to October 12th of 2023. And why did you find out, or what did you find out on October 12th of 2023? I received a phone call from a sergeant with the Fishers PD that Mr. Fortson had committed self-unaliving. And were you able to gather any information about the facts surrounding his self-unaliving? Fishers PD said that it was obvious. I'm going to catch myself from saying that because you can't say that word on YouTube. All right, sorry. So Fishers PD said that it was an obvious self-deletion and that during a conversation with his wife, he was upset and because of the photos that he leaked and that he wished he would have just been honest. Did you contact any other investigation into his self-deletion? Did you conduct any other investigation into his self-deletion? No. Once your investigation was complete, were you able to determine the chain of how the photos were leaked? Yes. Can you tell me that? Mr. Hennessy says, objection, preliminary question. Was this based on stuff people told you? Answer, no, I don't believe so. Mr. Hennessy says, was it based on documents that you read? Yes, more likely that. So basically, you're going to express your conclusions based on information, yes, provided by other people, correct. Objection, denial of right of confrontation, hearsay. Mr. McLeland says, again, Judge, this is through the course of an investigation. I'm trying to elicit from him a summary of what conclusions he found from his investigation into the leaked photos, Judge. Overruled. And so, Mr. Holman, can you tell me from your investigation, what were you able to determine how the photos were leaked? I was able to determine that Mitch Westerman, who used to work for Mr. Baldwin, was also in the Air Force with Robert Fortson prior. He wasn't at the time, but he was friends with Robert Fortson through the Air Force. And it appeared to me through my investigation that he was sending information that he was getting directly from Mr. Baldwin to Mr. Fortson. And Mr. Fortson was putting that information out to people. What proof? What platforms? They're saying it came directly from Mr. Baldwin? Evidence. All right, so what platforms was Mr. Fortson using to disseminate that information? He was using Facebook and also Reddit. And did Mr. Fortson disseminate the crime scene photo that we previously admitted into evidence? Yes. And were you able to examine the contents of the conversations between Mr. Fortson and Mr. Snee? Is that correct? Mr. Snee? Mr. Cohen? Sorry, I'm getting confused. Mr. Cohen, yes. And from the conversation, were you able to determine whether this was a one-time leak of photos or an ongoing leak? Mr. Hennessy says, objection, based on hearsay, it's an opinion, not a fact, and he should not be allowed to testify to it. Sustained on opinion. Oh, that's surprising. All right. Anyways, she actually sustained a defense objection. That's one. That's the first one. All right. And we're on page 55. All right. So through the investigation into Richard's case, did you interview a professor at Purdue by the name of Professor Turco? Yes. And you interviewed him in September of 2023. Is that correct? That is correct. Why'd you interview him at that time? During the deposition with Mr. Baldwin, I mentioned that we had received information from a Purdue professor, but I did not know his name, so I found out who he was, and I found out that he was never technically been interviewed, so I went and interviewed him. Yeah, but you said you would never know, like he said that we don't know who it was, we can't find the information on them, and we may never find the information. And then as soon as the Franks memo came out, the first one in September of 2023, they go and interview him September of 2023. Pretty crazy. Pretty crazy coincidence, right? That would be a pretty crazy coincidence. And it was after the 18th, obviously. It was like a few days. It was just a couple days after the Franks memo came out that they went to go interview him. All right, so, and you conducted that interview and then turned it over to be included in discovery for the defense. Is that correct? Yes. And that interview was done in September of 2023, yes? Or he says yes. And then from your investigation, were you able to determine if Fortson was talking about that interview? Yes, I did. And when he was talking about that interview, if you know, I know it was right after Mr. Hennessy says, I'm going to object. Will the court just show a continuing objection to the testimony based on the conversation between two other people? Yes. Fortson and Cohen. Thank you. So, she interrupted him. All right. And so, were you able to determine when Mr. Fortson was, so we're back to McLeland questioning, were you able to determine when Mr. Fortson was talking about that interview between you and Professor Turco? It was within days. I don't know the exact date. I'd have to look. And was that information ever released to the public by you? No. Was that information, to your knowledge, was that information out to the public? No. Were there other instances during the course of your investigation where there were other instances that you found where Fortson was releasing information and that was only privy to the defense? Yes. Objection, conclusion, ask that it be stricken. Sustained. That's 2. Cause, answer, because answer came in so quick. I'm sorry. Sustained. Thank you. And stricken? Sure. Thank you. So that's 3, I guess, if you count the stricken, but I don't. We'll count it as 2. 2 wins for the defense the whole day so far. I don't have any other questions, Judge. McLeland says, thank you. Hennessy, the court says, Mr. Hennessy. So Mr. Hennessy says, thank you. And now this is cross-examination of Lieutenant Jerry Holman. This is going to be interesting. All right. Hennessy says, let me start where you stopped. So the Professor Turco report, the only time you've seen that is in this private discussion between Mr. Fortson and Mr. Cohen. The only time I saw what? The only reference you've testified to about the Professor Turco interview was in the conversation between 2 people, Fortson and Cohen, correct? Yes. So you didn't see it publicly disseminated out on the internet? No, I did not. So that was just contained in the conversation? To my knowledge, yes. And then back to Westerman. In your report, you did a report of your investigation? Yes. On just these, what we'll call the leak investigation? I did, yes. And the original report was 33 pages? I'll believe you. I don't know exactly how long my actual report was because there's other people involved in it. And then say the original was 33 pages, then with the attachments it turned out to be 272 pages? Yes. Okay, now, in there, you placed Mr. Westerman's affidavit that was filed with the court? No, I don't know what you're talking about. You don't think you did? My affidavit? Westerman's affidavit was filed with this court. Have you ever seen it? Yes. Okay, so you know that he said he took photos of stuff, but didn't take the actual stuff, discovery materials. That is correct. And that Mr. Baldwin had no knowledge that he had done it. Yes. And that he did so without any authority from either Mr. Baldwin or Mr. Rosie. That's what he said. Yes. And there is no evidence that Mr. Baldwin or Mr. Rosie authorized Mr. Westerman to share anything with anybody. That is correct. And then were you involved in seeking the prosecution of Mr. Westerman? Yes. And then, so you had conversations with Mr. Hamner, the elected prosecutor of Johnson County? I did. And that's where Mr. Baldwin's office is? Yes. And that's where Mr. Westerman purloined by photographs, correct? Yes. Yes, sir. And then he passed it out to a special prosecutor. He did. And then you also discussed seeking charges against Mr. Baldwin. I did. And none were ever filed? No, none were ever filed. And then I wish I'd stop saying, and then so there's 5 photos that you received from the murder sheet people. There were more than that. Oh, okay. But 5 in evidence. 5 that I believe were from the crime scene. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Now, you said you recognized some of them of having viewed them at depositions by Mr. Baldwin and Rosie. Yes, sir. When you saw the one that has the blackout, the circle, and did that have blackouts at the deposition? Yes, I believe so. I'm sorry. And then you said something about a side-by-side? I did. Side-by-side of what? If you can say without revealing too much because it's under seal. Sure, there was a side-by-side. Half the paper was a picture of Abigail and the other half was a picture of an asterisk. Of a who? Like an asterisk, like a star. Now, you talked about your attempt to get a statement from Mr. Fortson. Yes, I did. And did you threaten him with jail? No. Do you remember giving a deposition on March 1st? I do. And have you reviewed it? I did. You had one. I didn't sign it because there was, what'd you say? I did not sign it because there was missing information and false statements in there. What'd you say? I did not sign it because there was missing information and had false statements. Incorrect. Well, yeah, I'll give you that it was incorrect, but I don't know. False is a little strong. Incorrect. And it was a transcriber. And so you received it. You've had depositions before? Yeah. So when you received it, there was an etc. sheet or what is an errata sheet? Errata? I don't know what that is. Affirmative response. Correct. Did you? And then, so this process, I have to know. What is it? I can't. My brain will not stop thinking about it if I don't look it up. What is an errata sheet, or however you say it? An error in printing or in writing.
Erratum.
Erratum is the plural noun. I don't know. That's what it gave me. All right, so that's what it means, just missing or whatever information. Okay. Yeah, affirmative response. All right, so correct. Did you? And then, so the process is, if you find mistakes, you go to the errata sheet, you correct them, and then you sign your errata sheet. I filled it out, but I told the prosecutor that there was a lot missing, so I don't know if it was just not transcribed, but I wasn't going to sign it because it was the first part of our deposition was missing. Right, yeah. But the part that was there, you could have ascribed to. Sure. Okay, all right. Oh, Mr. Hennessy says, may I have a moment? Sorry. I'll come back to that. Did you tell Mr. Fortson that he could be held in contempt of court and or charged with obstruction of justice? Yes. Do you feel guilty that you may have played a role in your part, or you may have played a role in his self-deletion? All right, so yes, he did offer him or threaten him with being held in contempt of court and or charged with obstruction of justice. Did you tell him you could get the judge on the phone immediately? No. You didn't say, let me call the judge real quick? I did say I was going to call the judge, yes. And you said, I'm going to call the judge, let her know, and see if she wants to issue that order of contempt. Correct? Yes, sir. Then you went out of the room. I did. Did you call the judge? I did not. Why did you tell Mr. Fortson you could call the judge? So I'm in the military, so I have a chain of command, and I was brought up that way. I called the prosecutor first. I've never done a contempt, so I thought I was going to have to give the information directly to the judge because she ordered it. I talked to the prosecutor, and he said that he would forward the information. Guys, believe him? I don't know. Why did you give Mr. Fortson the impression that you had the ability, the judge's phone number, and could call her immediately? I don't believe I did. Well, when you said, let me call the judge real quick, what impression did you think a person would have? I said I was going to go call the judge. Yes. Yeah, so what do you think a person's impression of that would be? Objection. McLeland says, judge calls for speculation. The guy has the ability to call the judge, right? The court said sustained. She sustained another one? No. Oh, sorry. She sustained it for McLeland. Never mind. That was a McLeland. And of course, she sustained it for McLeland. All right. So did you tell him it would ruin things for Mr. Allen? What's that? Did you tell him it would ruin things for Mr. Allen? Yes, I said it would ruin things for everybody. Yes. And then you said that it didn't, I quote, "It doesn't bother me any because it's all bullshit in my opinion." Yes, sir. And then you told him that you had gotten information from Mark Robert? Yes. Who you later learned was Mark Robert Cohen. That is correct. And a K. Smith? I believe I said K. Smith or Kyra Smith, which I was confused because both of those names came up, so I wasn't sure if that was the same person or if that was a different person, but later I identified that person to be actually before that, but I forgot that the person was Kayla DeBrune. So you don't believe there was a K. Smith that exists. If there is, there probably is, but I do not know her. I've never spoken with her. Okay, I want to go back to my question about, did you threaten jail? Okay. And on page 14, the question was, didn't you indicate to him that he could go to jail over this? I did. Okay. I did indicate, I said there's a possibility that the judge could order a contempt if a contempt is what I said. Wait, hold on. I butchered that. Answer. I did indicate it. I said there's a possibility that the judge could order a contempt is what I said in my interview. So, yeah, you told him you could go to jail over this. I did not threaten him. That's a threat. Any normal person would consider a cop saying you could go to jail for this is a threat. I did not threaten him. I told him there was a possibility that he could. Well, I was just being upfront. Your opinion is not a threat. In your opinion, it's not a threat. Would you admit that some people might take that as a threat? Mr. McLeland says, objection, Judge. Again, this calls for speculation. Sustained. Do you recall Mr. Fortson telling you that he wanted to have consultation before he talked to you? He did. And at first, he just simply said consultation? No, he said that he thought he needed to talk to somebody. Right. And then later he specified attorney? Yes. And you kept talking to him. I did not ask him questions, but I was explaining to him what I was there for. And yes, I didn't ask questions until after I talked to the prosecutor. And then you asked questions? I asked him, I think, one question, and that was, is he not willing to, maybe a few, I don't know, I'd have to look. Yeah. But I asked him if he was not willing to give up the information that I knew he had, and he said, not without a lawyer. I said, that's fine. But he had invoked counsel before then. Absolutely. And you took a recorded statement from a Ms. Ienfeld? I did. And she had some pictures? She had pictures on her phone, yes. Did you see them? I did. And did you connect them to any of the other pictures? Yes. Which ones? I don't recall exactly which ones, but it should be in my report that they were ones that were released to Mr. Fortson, to Mr. Cohen. I had her delete them. But she told you that she got them from a Tyler Carpenter? Yes. And who is he? I don't know. You could never find him. Nope. What effort did you make? What's that? What effort did you make to find the source of the photos, Tyler Carpenter? At that time, I talked to the prosecutor, and that time we weren't interested in all the people that had him, because we'd already located the source and where they came from. If there was only one source, correct? To my knowledge, yes, there was only one source. But that's your belief? Through my investigation, I've only located one source. Right. Yeah. But, so what you had at that point was your belief that Westerman obtained these pictures without permission, correct? Yes. That he gave them to one person only, Mr. Fortson. Yes. That Mr. Fortson gave them to Mr. Cohen. Yeah, and Mrs. De Bruin. Kyra told you. Kyra. Oh yeah, I'll get there. So you had no interest in knowing who else had them. We had a lot of people who had them, and at that point nobody was releasing them, so we got the word out that there could be potential consequences if they did release them. So after speaking to the prosecutor, well, in all of your interviews, you told them that the judge was adamant that you find the photos and get them or delete them. Have them deleted, yes. And every person that you did talk to, that you identified in the chain, you talked to them about contempt? I talked to them about what? Contempt. Yes. Possibility. So from that, you learned that a Tyler Carpenter allegedly had them? No, Kyra De Bruin. No. Who? Tyler Carpenter. Kyla? Tyler Carpenter. I don't know. I don't know either. You just admitted that Ms. Ahlenfeld told you that she got them from a Tyler Carpenter. Are you saying Tyler? Tyler. Yes. Carpenter. Yes. So, what was the confusion? I thought you said Kyra Carpenter. Are you kidding me? Oh, it was Kyra De Bruin. And you were charged with getting these photos, but you didn't locate or attempt to locate Tyler, who allegedly had them because, well, you'd already found out who you believed the source was, correct? Yes. And you made the decision in conjunction with Mr. McLeland? What's that again? You made the decision in conjunction with Mr. McLeland. Yes, I did have a discussion with the prosecutor. And then Ms. Eilenfeld told you about a screenshot somehow connected to George Rye, who was former law enforcement. Do you recall that? It was a separate investigation, but yes. And what was that investigation? Was that investigation not related to leaks? Correct. That was the investigation. The information she was giving me was not related to leaks. What investigation was it related to? Harassment. Harassment. And then she told you she had sent them to Christina Mack. She sent the photos to her, or yeah, the photos. Yes. And so what are they saying here? And so did you go talk to Christina Mack? No. So she might still have these photos. She hasn't released them, so she has not released them. If she does, I think most people, well, you haven't seen that she's released them. Correct. So you don't know how many people she maybe sent them to? That's correct. And the name with Tyler Carpenter, he might still have them? Yes, sir. And then how many total photos do you believe Westerman took? I don't recall exactly that he took what he took. There were some that looked like they were downloaded from another Facebook page. I think he probably took, I'm sorry, I'd have to look at the photos to give a number. What'd you say about downloaded from a Facebook page? There were some downloaded from somebody's Facebook page. By Westerman? I don't know. They were just sent to Mr. Fortson? I'm sorry? They were sent from Mr. Fortson to Mr. Cohen? I don't know who. Oh. So Mr. Fortson maybe downloaded other pictures from Facebook? Could have, yes. And did Mr. Fortson, to your knowledge, have other sources for photographs and information on the investigation? To my knowledge, no. So in his conversation with Mr. Cohen, he doesn't talk about other people? Can you repeat that? Who doesn't talk to other people? I'm sorry? Can you repeat that question? You said you reviewed conversation between Fortson and Cohen, and so my question was, did Fortson talk about other people? Yes. He said he didn't give you any information, and now you have to pull out everything by asking the right questions from this guy. All right. So did he ever mention Westerman? Just Mr. Baldwin. He mentioned Mr. Baldwin. Fortson? Yes. Mentioned Mr. Baldwin. Yes, sir. In what respect? In the screenshots of the text messages between them two. He said, Mr. Baldwin told me I'm going up to Allen County. Mr. Baldwin told me this. Mr. Baldwin told me that the crime scene was going to be da-da-da-da. All right, so you're saying that Fortson claimed that Mr. Baldwin had directed conversations with him. That's what it was alluding to, yes. You ever corroborate that? I tried to. With what? Phone records? No, I tried to interview Mr. Fortson and Mr. Westerman. Right, and you didn't. You had Detective Rector interview Mr. Baldwin. What? Could you repeat the question? Yes, you had Detective Rector interview Mr. Baldwin. Yes, I did. For 2 hours? I don't know. I wasn't there. You mean you haven't looked at it? No. And did you say, hey, ask him about contact with Mr. Fortson? I don't believe I told Mr. or Detective Rector how to conduct his interview. No. Did you get a download or forensic examination of Mr. Fortson's cell phones and electronic devices? Detective Rector said yes. And so, have you reviewed the phone records? Just in discussion with Rector, yes. What did you say? Just in discussion with Detective Rector. Oh, any corroboration that Mr. Baldwin ever spoke to Mr. Fortson in the phone records? Like, why is he just not answering these questions? I don't recall, but that'd be a great question for Detective Rector. Okay. This guy. Ay. All right, so Holman, I don't understand. Like his answers are, he's like evading all of the questions and like choosing not to answer them or going, what? Repeat the question. So you got two older gentlemen talking back and forth in a court that has lousy audio and they can't hear one another. All right, so continuing on, Mr. Hennessy says, don't go anywhere. All right, so question, early on, the discovery of the victims, there was a leak from a search party, correct? Yes. Mr. McLeland says, objection, Judge. And that Mr. McLeland says, again, I don't think it's not sure where you're going with this line of questioning. Mr. Holman answered before I could object, but I don't know that it is relevant to what we're here to discuss today, Judge. I don't think it's relevant to these proceedings. Mr. Hennessy says, I'll tie it up. The court says, and if you don't, I'll argue why it's relevant. The court says, I'll give you a little leeway, but it needs to be tied up. She's actually giving him a little leeway, so I guess that's 3 wins now for the defense. Because he's getting some leeway. All right, so question. That leak was crime scene photos. Yes. Well, no, it wasn't a crime scene yet because the search party had found them, so we didn't get to them, so it couldn't have been a crime. Right. It couldn't have been a crime scene yet. It wasn't a crime scene yet because the search party located them. It wasn't a crime scene until we got there and secured the scene, but it was photos of articles that eventually were in the crime scene. Does that make sense to you, sir? Not really. Okay. Because there was photos of the girls? No. And the sticks? I never saw those. You don't believe? May I have a moment, Judge? You may. What? Yeah, I said you may. Hearing problem thing. I mean, I have a hearing problem, so I would be worse off, probably. Anyways. All right, so, okay. My right ear just suddenly, like, I lost some hearing in it for some reason. It might have been an infection or I don't know, but it's never been the same. Anyways, all right, so, okay. In your deposition, at page 8, under oath of March 1st of 2024, you indicated that the leak from the search party member had some text messages and some photos of clothing. Yes. And you're not calling them crime scene photos. Why? Because it was before the police was notified. It was a crime scene until we got there. So you're saying civilians found the girls first. Yes. So then he took pictures before law enforcement got there? That is what I believe. Yes. And then he publicized them. Yes. Who? Who are we talking about again? I don't remember. Fortson? I think we're talking about 410. All right, so may I have a minute, blah, blah, blah. All right, let's keep going. Where did I leave off? It wasn't a crime scene until we got there, so civilians found the girls first, and then he took pictures of the girls. That is what I believe. Yes. All right, McLeland says, Judge, I'm going to object at this point. I'm failing to see how he's tying this up and how it's relevant to the contemptuous information that the state has filed and the point of this hearing, Judge. Mr. Hennessy says, there were other crime scene photos out there. I mean, he's technically saying it's not a crime scene because law enforcement hasn't shown up, but it was the scene of the crime, and some other guy, way before the defense attorneys were appointed, had photos of clothing and other things we don't know what. So yes, I believe it's relevant because that was out in the public arena long before any photos from Westerman. The court says, these weren't crime scene photos taken by the police? Correct. Okay, then it's not a crime scene. Are you kidding me, Judge Gall? He says, what'd you say? She says, then it's not a crime scene, not crime scene photos. These may be photos taken by civilians, but he's testifying that they were not there yet. Correct, but so they can't be pictures, crime scene photos taken by police. But it's pictures of the scene of the crime. Like, how is, like, are we in a Twilight Zone? It's pictures of the scene of a crime, and if you put them out in the public, you're not going to be able to discern when the police showed up or not. You don't know if it's a police photo or not. It doesn't matter if it's a civilian photo or a police photo. It's still a crime scene photo, regardless. I don't understand the logic in this. This is making my head spin. All right, let's keep going. We got a ways to go still. All right. So, but it's pictures of the crime scene, and if you put them out there to the public, you're not going to be able to discern them. Okay. Or discern when the police showed up, whether these are police photos or other photos, but they will clearly be to the public pictures of the scene of the crime. Mr. McLeland says, Judge, we're here to discuss the photos that were leaked from the defense. I don't think there's a debate about that, and I've got some additional documents to file that I would ask the court to take judicial notice of. I don't think there's any debate that the crime scene photos that were leaked in this situation came from the defense. The defense has admitted that. And so now Mr. Hennessy wants to say, well, I'm not sure that he wants to say. He wants to say there were other photos taken, and since those were leaked, the ones leaked by the defense are no big deal. Is that what I think he wants to say? Well, I don't think that's what he's trying to say. He's trying to say, how do you discern that it's from the defense or another leak? There's other leaks that are taking place. I think the prosecution is leaking things too. Why is McLeland in conversation with Gary Baudet or Fig Solves or whatever his name is, who is very pro-prosecution in this case? And there's some evidence that he might have been getting information from somebody in the court. Somebody that had insider knowledge. Because on his YouTube channel, he would put things out prior to them happening, or saying, you know, I knew that this was going to happen before it happened. So there's a lot of shady stuff. Shady stuff. All right, so McLeland says, but I'm not sure, but I don't know how that's relevant to the crime scene photos that were leaked in this instance. The court says, how are these relevant? Mr. Hennessy says, because they need to establish that Mr. Baldwin and or Mr. Rosie publicly disseminated what they've alleged, and it goes to the weight of their evidence that, in fact, there were other sources of photos of the scene of the crime. Yes, exactly. The court says, and I will give it the weight that it deserves, sir. Please proceed. Is that a win? Sort of? I don't know. Thank you. And that was investigated by other people? Yes. And the fellow that had the pictures, law enforcement just told him not to do that again? Correct. So nobody reported it to the prosecutor, to your knowledge. To my knowledge, no, but more than likely they probably discussed it. I'm sorry? That would have been the former prosecutor. Oh, you'd have to ask him. Mr. Hennessy says, Judge, that's all I have for Sergeant Holman at this time. Court says, Mr. McLeland. Mr. McLeland says, thank you, Judge. And now redirect examination of Lieutenant Jerry Holman begins. Questioning by Mr. McLeland. Lieutenant Holman, Mr. Hennessy asked if there was any evidence authorizing or any evidence showing that Baldwin or Rosie authorized to share anything to anybody. You recall that question? I do. And from looking at the documents of the conversation between Fortson and Cohen, were you able to find evidence the leak was ongoing? Yes. Mr. Hennessy says, objection, hearsay, it's an opinion, it's a conclusion, it's for the court, not the police. If they want to go pull out evidence, conversations, even though it would be objectionable for hearsay, they would be overruled. If they want to point to specific facts, then it allows them to argue to the court the conclusion that it was ongoing. That would be proper. But to simply ask the detective, did you find, what evidence? Did you just find evidence that the leak was ongoing? Leak from who? To whom? So I object. Relevancy, a conclusion of law, actually, and an opinion that's not supported by facts that are currently in evidence or identified to the defense. Mr. McLeland says, Judge, the state believes Mr. Hennessy's opened the door at this point for us to be able to talk about the contents of the messages. He asked if there was any evidence authorizing or from Baldwin or Rosie authorizing to share anything with anybody. He also asked if the defense was ever able to confirm or was ever able to see if Fortson had mentioned Baldwin's name, if he had other sources. And so with those questions, Judge, I believe he's opened the door for us to talk about the contents of those messages, and the state would like to do that. Man, these guys are long-winded. Anybody ever tell lawyers that they're long-winded? Probably all the time. All right, so Mr. Hennessy says, I would agree. If they want to go point to something or a number of things within the conversations that allows the court to conclude the leak was ongoing, where they identify sources in the document, it's in there. But they can't just simply say, hey, you've read this whole thing and you found out the leak was ongoing. That's not a proper question. Overruled. Judge, I guess I'll withdraw the question and we'll just point to specific facts or specific conversations within the exhibit that's been admitted. Question. So, Mr. Holman, I'm going to show you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 6. Now, you've testified earlier that is a question between Mr. Fortson and Mr. Cohen, and so I'd like you to read on page 1 here. This first message I'm directing you to, can you read that? Read it to yourself. Are you familiar with that message? Yes. Can you read to the court what it says? It says, what up? Same rules? Let's get permission to share anything outside our combo and respect any no's. And that message is from whom? Who's sending it? Robert Fortson. I want to draw your attention to the next page and this conversation here. Can you read that to the court? Mr. Hennessy says, I'm sorry, what page? Well, they're not marked. Here, I'll show you. Yeah, I know. Okay. And can you read that message to the best of your ability to the court? It should be next weekend. I'm sitting in Franklin with it. They want me to. And they want me to punch holes in all their stuff and look at it. And that message is from whom? Robert Fortson. Where is Mr. Baldwin's office located? Franklin. Lieutenant Holman, I ask you to take a look at that message. Can you read that message to the court? Mr. Hennessy says, Judge, I'm going to object because this particular message is no connection to, I can't find it. Because they didn't number these things. The exhibit is in. What did you say? The exhibit has been admitted. The court says they are allowed to discuss the exhibit that is properly before the court, sir. Mr. Hennessy says, well, the court says, you may continue. Mr. McLeland says, thank you. Can you read that, Mr. Holman? Yes, sir. Defense just got the girls' phone records. No details yet, but they're saying that there is good stuff in there, or the stuff good on there. We'll go to the next page. Can you read the message? This one. That's the one. Okay. So, same message, they're recorded. Who is that message from? Rob Fortson. And so, Fortson's saying that the defense just got the phone records of the girls? Yes. Okay, I draw your attention to this message. Can you please read it in your own, or read it into the record? Sorry. Read it into the record. Purdue professor said the exact opposite of what Holman said. Andy has the audio from it. Hennessy says, I'm sorry, and continuing the answer, a Purdue professor who is still there, mind you, consulted with a Harvard professor and said, yes, those are runes. Yes, it is a cult-related stuff, so digest that for a second in the grand scheme of the police work. And who is that message from? There's more. You want me to? Go ahead. And sorry, I'm a slow reader. That's okay. Judge has asked that she is going to get a suppression hearing, but Andy is looking to... Why are these pages so, like, Xerox weird? But Andy is looking for clarity on that means Frank's hearing and what she is here... What? And what she is meaning for, sure. We shall see. I'll watch that now. What? Okay, read that again. Was that a continuance of this sentence up here? Okay, let's start over. So the Purdue professor who is still there, mind you, consulted with a Harvard professor and said, yes, those are runes. Yes, it is cult-related stuff, so digest that for a second in the grand scheme of police work. Judge has said she is going to get suppressions hearing, but Andrew Baldwin is looking for clarity. That means Frank's hearing or what she is meaning for sure. We shall see. I'll watch that now. That's from Robert Fortson. And what is the date on that message? October 2nd. May I see that page? Sure. Thank you, Hennessy says. All right, so continuing on. Again, Lieutenant Holman, when was the date to that message? October 2nd. And when did you conduct the interview of Professor Turco? In September. I don't remember the exact, but I turned it over a couple days before this to you. Did you ever release that interview to the public? No. Did you release it to anybody but my office? No. And are you familiar with somebody involved in this case that goes by Andy? Yes. Who? Mr. Baldwin. That's Mr. Baldwin's name? Yes, Andy. Okay. Mr. Hennessy says, Your Honor, may I go over there so I can read what they're not going to show up? So Mr. McLeland doesn't have to come back and forth. Certainly. What'd you say? Certainly. Thank you. This is like, what? Like that old couple that can't hear one another or see one another. What? All right, so the court says, certainly, thank you. Lieutenant Holman, I'll direct your attention to this. Can you read this message? I thought about a way I could show you the crime scene without sending the pics, maybe photograph something with the pics on my phone in the photo. And who's that from? Robert Fortson. And who's it directed to? Mr. Cohen. Mr. Rosie. Ooh, Mr. Rosie says, Judge, I couldn't hear who said it was directed to. Could you please have them repeat it? It's a little tough to hear back here. Sure, I'll ask the question again. Who was this message from? Robert Fortson. And who was it directed to? Robert or Mark Cohen. Rosie says thank you. Will you read the message, please? Facebook? I have no worries about it. It's technically crime scene and a big piece of current evidence. Who is that message from? Robert Fortson. And then could you read the series of messages, please? Go side by side with the Barbara one. Make it a poll. Ask F, ruin, spatter, other. 4 options there. Tell them to list their other. Tell them to list their other in the comments. I'd also let them argue over it if it's the actual F. That's from Fortson and Mr. Cohen. So throughout your history as a law enforcement officer, you've had an opportunity to investigate several crimes. Is that correct? Yes. And you had an opportunity to read those messages and go over the entirety of State's Exhibit 6. Is that correct? Yes. From your investigation, what conclusion did you draw from that information? Mr. Hennessy says, objection, improper question. It's not for the witness to conclude, and it's summing up. Overruled. I'll rephrase the question, Judge. That's fine. Overruled. She says it again. Like, you don't have to. All right, so Lieutenant Holman, were you able to conclude from these messages that a leak was ongoing? Yes. Mr. Hennessy says, that's no different than the very first time that he tried to do it, and the court sustained the objection. And then he just backed up and slipped it right in by me, and Mr. Holman answered like really, really quick. So I object, ask that it be stricken. Sustained. Hell yeah, another win. I think we're on like 4 wins now for the defense. So that's pretty good. The court says sustained. All right, Mr. Hennessy says, I'm sorry, sustained. Stricken, certainly. Mr. Hennessy says, thank you. Okay, Lieutenant Holman, the messages you read, do they correspond with events that were happening during the course of your investigation? Yes. Meaning information that was being leaked? Yes. To your knowledge, that you know of, did anybody else besides defense have that information? Not to my knowledge, no. Specifically, the Turco interview that you had done before, that you had done days before it leaked to Fortson. Yes. Wait, okay. So specifically the Professor Turco interview. To your knowledge that you know of, did anybody else besides defense have that information, specifically the Turco interview? Did anybody else have the Turco interview? He says yes. And Fortson is directing Cohen to push this stuff out to the public. Is that correct? Yes, he is. And from the text messages, what is the purpose of pushing it out to the public? To get their opinion. To do what? To get the public's opinion. I don't have any other questions, Judge. Thank you. Because they had it like a poll, like, what they read in there. Okay, so Mr. Hennessy is going to begin cross-examination of Lieutenant Jerry Holman. All right, so, recross exam, sorry. So questions by Mr. Hennessy. Mr. McLeland started to say, and he said, we're going to go get... give me a moment. I get, word bungled when I get tired or stressed out. Okay. Calm down. Mr. McLeland, I just have to, slow down and breathe. I forget to breathe. All right, so Mr. McLeland started to say, and he said, we're going to go through these individual pages to establish a connection before Mr. Baldwin and Mr. Fortson. You remember that? Yes. And so, Mr. Fortson, first off, do you know anything about Mr. Fortson's credibility? No. Did you know that he pretended to be a lawyer? I have no proof of that, no. Well, Mr. Cohen told you. He said Mr. Cohen said that he thought he was. No, he said he represented himself as an attorney. As an attorney, yeah. What did you say? I think you're correct, yes. Okay, so was he an attorney? No. So there's a false statement, correct? Yes. At least one false statement from Fortson. Yes. And then he said he's sitting in Franklin, but doesn't say where? Correct. And do you know where? If Mr. Westerman had connections to Franklin? Do I know if Mr. Westerman has connections to Franklin other than Mr. Baldwin? Correct. No. Do you know if his girlfriend lives in Franklin? At that time, I did not know that. No. So his girlfriend does live in Franklin. Bam, right there. Do you know if Mr. Fortson would meet Mr. Westerman in Franklin? No. And then you said the defense got the phone records, correct? You read them? That part? I read that part. Yes, I didn't say that. That has no reference to Mr. Baldwin, did it? I don't think so. No. And then he said, with regard to the Professor Turco, he said, Andy has the audio? Yes. And do you know Westerman didn't tell him Andy has the audio? How do you know Westerman didn't tell him Andy has the audio? More than likely, that's what happened, yes. So that's not necessarily direct contact between Mr. Fortson and Mr. Baldwin. No. And then shows the crime scene. There was no reference to Mr. Baldwin in that one you read, correct? Correct. And then the Facebook no worries, crime scene, big piece of evidence. There was no reference to Mr. Baldwin, correct. And then, so there's only one time Fortson says Andy, and he doesn't attribute it to Mr. Baldwin. It could have been Mr. Westerman. That we discussed, yes, sir. That'd be what? There's actually more references to Andy in there, but we didn't go over them. But nothing Fortson's saying, hey, I'm with Mr. Baldwin. No. Nothing saying, hey, I talked to Andy directly. I'd have to check on that. Okay. And then you read one about a Barbara, and you're familiar with Barbara McDonald having leaked Professor Turco's report? No, I'm not. Did you not investigate that? No. And you said you said it was your opinion or belief that somebody wanted to release this stuff to get the public's opinion, right? That's what it said, yes. Who was that? Fortson or Cohen? It was Fortson. Okay, so he never said, you should put this out there to damage the prosecution. Did I what? What? Could you please repeat the question? So he never said, put this out there to damage the prosecution. Who? Fortson, the same guy that just wanted to get the public's opinion. Not to my knowledge, no. Okay, that's all I have for now. The court says, thank you, Lieutenant. You may step down. And the witness says, thank you. The court says, could you just give that exhibit to Jody, please? You may call your next witness. Mr. McLeland says, Judge, before I do that, I've got a few more documents I'd like the court to take judicial notice of. I've marked them as State's Exhibits 7, 8, and 9. 7 is an email from Mr. Baldwin to the court dated October 9th of 2022. Number 8 is a letter to Mr. Rosie filed with the court, and that's in the CCS. And then number 9 is the affidavit filed by Mr. Westerman in the CCS in this case, Judge. I'm sorry, what was 7? If my 7, an email of Mr. Baldwin directed to the court, to myself, and to Mr. Rosie. Okay. On October 9th, I believe, Judge, any objection? No objection to the admission of 7, 8, and 9. The court says, all right, without objection, they are admitted. Judge, the state would call Detective Ben Rector. And Rector gets called to the stand, and at this moment in time, I am going to leave you with the cliffhanger. So, this is probably going to be a 4-part series, just because it's a very long document, and we're going through it, as we're swimming along as fast as we can. Just keep swimming, just keep swimming. And so anyways, we are going to end off here. Very interesting testimony by Holman. I don't know. I got more questions that didn't get answered. I think there's more questions now than ever, but the judge says a photo. This is the most baffling thing that I am going to take away from this document today. The judge says a photo that is taken of the crime scene, but is taken by someone other than the police. It's not called a crime scene. It wouldn't be considered a crime scene photo, even though it's of a crime scene. But because the police didn't take the photo, it's not a crime scene photo. It's just a photo. What? I don't get it. I don't get it. This Judge Gull, I don't know. At least we got 4 wins for the defense. I'll take it. Oh boy, we still have so more to go. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you following along with this wild Delphi ride with me. And I hope to see you in the next one. Please don't forget to hit the like on your way out. And I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye now. If you've been impacted by a true crime and would like your story told in your own words, or if you or someone you know has been wrongfully convicted or accused of a crime, please write to crimeincourtchannel@gmail.com and tell us your real true crime encounters. Thanks for watching.